There's a word in Japan for the feeling you get when something good goes to waste. The word is mottainai. Most people outside Japan think it simply means don't throw things away. That isn't quite it, and the real meaning is far more useful to you tonight. The old part of the word means the true worth of a thing. The second part means that worth is missing. So mottainai is the small ache you feel when something is not being allowed to be what it is. Which means a coat nobody wears is mottainai, a pan at the back of a cupboard is mottainai, a room you can't sit in because of what's stored there is mottainai. That's the part people miss. Keeping a thing forever isn't the opposite of waste. Sometimes it is the waste. Japanese homes are small. Most of them are far smaller than an American house, and that fact has quietly taught a whole country which things earn their space and which ones never did. Over the next few hours, you'll hear 100 of them. 100 ordinary things that sit in Western homes and almost never sit in Japanese ones. Before that begins, one thing. You don't have to listen to this. You really don't. There's no lesson coming, nothing to remember in the morning, and nothing you're meant to get up and do. If you fall asleep at the 9th thing, you've missed nothing. Each one stands on its own. There's no story running underneath them, no ending to stay awake for, and nobody keeping score. The lights are low. You've done enough today. So let's just walk slowly through a Japanese home, room by room, and look at what isn't there. Thing 1. The row of half-empty shampoo bottles. Look under a Western sink, and you'll usually find them. 4 or 5 bottles, none of them finished. A shampoo somebody didn't like, a conditioner from a hotel, a body wash bought when it was on offer. In Japan, that row mostly doesn't exist, and the reason is a small pouch. Japanese shops sell shampoo, conditioner, soap, and detergent in flat refill bags. You buy the bottle once, after that you buy the bag, and you pour it in. They call it tsumekai, which simply means refilling. This isn't a small habit either. About 8 in every 10 of these products sold in Japan are now sold as refills, not bottles. The refill bag uses roughly 80% less plastic than the bottle it fills. It began with a law. In 1997, Japan made companies pay a fee based on how much packaging they put into the world. Packaging stopped being free, so the packaging got smaller. The result in the bathroom is quiet. 1 bottle in the corner, 1 bag in the cupboard, nothing collecting behind the pipes. Thing 2. The bath mat, that's still damp from yesterday. Most Western bathrooms have a cloth mat on the floor. It gets stepped on wet. It stays wet. Somebody hangs it over the tub, and by evening it's damp again. Japanese bathrooms often use a different thing entirely. It's a firm, pale board that sits on the floor, made from soft stone called diatomite. In Japan, they call it kaisodo. The board is full of tiny holes, far too small to see. Water goes into them, and then leaves again on its own. Step off it, and the wet footprints fade while you're brushing your teeth. About 15 minutes later, the surface is dry. Nothing has to be hung up. Nothing sits in a laundry pile going sour. The material isn't new either. Japan has used this stone since the Edo period, hundreds of years ago, because it breathes. That's also why the board doesn't go moldy in a wet room, which is the real quiet gift of it. Thing 3. The shower curtain. This one surprises people, because a shower curtain feels like part of what a bathroom is. Most Japanese bathrooms don't have one, and it isn't a style choice. There's simply nothing for it to do. A Japanese bathroom is usually built as one piece. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, the tub, and the drain arrive as a single molded unit and get lowered into the building. They call it a unit bath. Because it's all one surface, there are no joins for water to get through, so the whole room is allowed to get wet. People stand outside the tub and wash, and the water simply goes to the floor and away. There's no curtain, because there's nothing to protect. It came from the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. Hotels had to be built faster than bathrooms could be tiled by hand, so the bathroom was made in a factory instead. It stayed. Thing 4. The carpet around the toilet. In a lot of Western bathrooms, there's soft fabric on the floor, a rug by the bath, sometimes a fitted carpet, sometimes a small shaped mat that hugs the base of the toilet. Japanese bathrooms don't have that, and once you know how the room is built, it makes sense. The floor is meant to be wet. It slopes very gently toward a drain, so water has somewhere to go. Putting cloth on it would be like putting a towel in a shower tray. There's a second reason. and it's the honest one. Fabric on a bathroom floor holds whatever lands on it. It gets damp, it stays warm, and it doesn't dry. A hard floor gets rinsed and it's finished. Thing 5. The drawer of hotel soaps. Almost every home has this drawer. Little bottles from hotels, tiny wrapped soaps, sewing kits, a shower cap nobody will ever wear. They're kept for guests. Guests never get them. Japanese homes generally don't build that collection, and the thinking behind it is rather warm. A guest in a Japanese home washes with the same soap the family uses. The hospitality isn't in producing a special little bottle, it's in the bath itself, which will have been heated and made ready for them. The guest is given the good thing, not the small spare thing. So the drawer never starts. And a drawer that never starts never needs a day set aside to clear it. Thing 6. A bath you get into dirty. This is one of the biggest differences of all, and it changes what a bathtub is for. In most Western homes, you run a bath, get in, wash yourself in the water, and let it out. In Japan, washing happens outside the tub. There's a low stool and a hand shower on the wall. People sit there and wash properly, and rinse everything off, and only then get into the bath. So nobody is ever sitting in their own soap. The bath isn't for cleaning. By the time you get in, you're already clean. The bath is for heat, and for the 10 quiet minutes at the end of a day. That one change explains a lot of what follows, including why the same water can be kept. Thing 7. A bath that gets emptied after one person. Because everyone is already clean when they get in, the water stays clean. So in most Japanese homes, one bath is filled and the whole family uses it, one after another, through the evening. The tub has a lid that goes on between people to hold the heat. Many baths can also warm themselves back up at the press of a button. That's called oidaki, which just means reheating. Even after all that, the water often isn't poured away. A lot of homes pump the last of it into the washing machine for the first wash of the laundry. There's no waste anywhere in it. One tub of hot water does a whole household and then does the washing. Thing 8. 9 kinds of towel. Open a Western linen cupboard and you'll find generations of towels. Big ones, thin ones, beach towels, the good set nobody uses, and 3 that should have gone years ago. Japanese bathrooms tend to run on something much smaller. It's a flat cotton cloth called a tenyugi, roughly the size of a scarf, and no thicker than a shirt. It doesn't hold water the way a thick towel does. It moves the water off you, and then it dries in about an hour because there's so little of it. Thin cloth doesn't need a heated rail or a spin cycle or a whole shelf. It hangs on a hook and it's ready again by morning. The thick towel isn't gone from Japan. It's just not the answer to everything, and the cupboard is smaller because of it. Thing 9. The laundry basket that lives in the bathroom. In a lot of homes, the basket sits by the bath and slowly fills through the week. By Saturday, it's a small hill. Japanese homes tend not to keep laundry standing. Washing usually goes on most days, often in the evening or first thing, and it goes straight out. Balconies are built for it. Most Japanese apartments have a pole or a rail outside for exactly this, and clothes go out there rather than into a machine that heats them. Because the wash happens daily, nothing piles up, and the basket never becomes furniture. There's a quiet benefit hiding in that. Damp clothes sitting in a warm room for 6 days are what make a bathroom smell like a bathroom. Thing 10. A bathroom with no way to dry itself. Japan is humid in summer, genuinely humid, in a way that turns a closed wet room into a problem within days. So a great many Japanese bathrooms have a fan and heater built into the ceiling that dries the whole room out after it's been used. It's called a yokushitsu kansuki, which means bathroom dryer. You close the door, it runs, and the room comes back to dry on its own. The same unit does something else that quietly matters. On a wet week, the laundry goes in there and dries overnight in the bathroom instead of hanging damp in a bedroom. One small machine in the ceiling replaces the mold, the open window in February, and the clothes horse in the living room. Thing 11. A toilet in the same room as the bath. In most Western homes, the toilet, the sink, and the bath all share one room. That's just what a bathroom is. In Japan, they're usually separated. The toilet sits in its own small room, with its own door, often its own tiny basin. There's a practical reason. If one person is in the bath for half an hour, nobody else in the house is locked out of the toilet. There's a second reason that runs deeper. In Japanese thinking, the bath is a clean place and the toilet is not, and those two things aren't allowed to share air. That's also why many Japanese toilets have their own slippers waiting inside the door. You step out of the house slippers and into the toilet ones, and you leave them behind when you go. Nothing travels from that room to the rest of the house, not on your feet, and not in the air. Thing 12. The drawer full of loose receipts. Nearly every home has one. A drawer, a jar, or a corner of the kitchen counter where receipts land and stay. They're kept in case they're needed. They almost never are, and after a year nobody would find the one that mattered anyway. Japan has an old habit that gives a receipt one clear job and then lets it go. It's a household money book called a kakeibo. The idea is simple. You write down what you meant to spend, you write down what you actually spent, and once the number is written, the paper has done its work. A woman named Hani Motoko invented it in 1904. She was Japan's first female newspaper reporter, and she made it for ordinary households, not for accountants. More than 100 years later, it's still sold in Japanese stationery shops every December for the year ahead. The drawer never fills because the number went into the book and the paper went out with the recycling. Thing 13. A shoebox of old bank statements. Statements arrive, and they get filed somewhere, and the somewhere becomes a box. For a long time, Japanese households have used something different. It's a small bank book called a tsucho, about the size of a passport. You take it to a machine at the bank, it goes in, and the machine prints your new lines into it. Everything's in one book. There's no stack, because the record is a single object you can hold, and when the book is full, the bank gives you the next one. The whole history of an account sits in a drawer, taking up less room than a paperback. Thing 14. A pile of other people's business cards. In Western offices, a business card gets pushed into a pocket or a wallet. Later it lands in a drawer, and eventually there's a small brick of them from people nobody remembers. Japan takes the card itself far more seriously, and that's exactly why fewer of them pile up. The card is called a meishi. It's handed over with both hands, and the person receiving it reads it properly before putting it away. During a meeting, the cards sit on the table in front of you, in the order people are sitting, so you use them. Afterwards, they go into a proper card book or file, sorted by company. Because there's a place for them, they arrive somewhere. A thing with a home doesn't become a pile. Thing 15. Newspapers kept to read later. The paper gets bought, part of it gets read, and the rest joins the stack by the chair. The stack becomes a small item of furniture. In Japan, that stack has a deadline built into it, and the deadline comes from outside the house. Japanese rubbish is sorted carefully, and paper has its own collection day. It's bundled, tied with string, and put out on that morning. So paper never becomes an open question. It's always waiting for a date that's already in the calendar. Nobody has to decide to deal with it. The town decided, years ago, and the decision arrives every week. Thing 16. Every piece of schoolwork a child ever brought home. Children produce an astonishing amount of paper. Drawings, worksheets, tests, projects on card. Parents keep it because throwing away a child's work feels like throwing away the child's effort. Japanese homes are usually too small to keep all of it, so they keep a little of it properly instead. One folder for the year is a common approach. What goes in is chosen, and often the child chooses. That last part matters more than it sounds. A child who picks the 5 drawings worth keeping is learning the same thing the whole house runs on. Not everything can stay, so choose. The rest goes out. What's kept is actually looked at, because there's little enough of it to find. Thing 17. A box of photographs nobody has sorted. Almost every family has one. Prints from 30 years, mixed together, some duplicated, some of nothing in particular. Japan has a habit that quietly sorts photographs once a year, and it isn't a tidying habit at all. Every winter, families choose one picture for their New Year card. The card is called a nengajo, and they're posted so that they all arrive on the 1st of January. Choosing one photograph from a year is a small yearly edit. The good one gets used. The other 40 stop mattering quite so much. Millions of these cards go out across Japan every year, so it happens in most houses at the same time, every December. Thing 18. Greeting cards from 10 years of birthdays. In many Western homes, cards get kept, They sit in a box in a wardrobe, and the box is never opened. Japanese New Year cards have an ending built into them. They arrive on the 1st of January. They're read, they're often displayed for a while, and then they're retired. There's even a custom of taking old ones to a shrine to be burned respectfully at the new year, which turns letting go into a small ceremony rather than a guilty act. Nothing has to be argued about. The card did its job, which was to reach you on a particular morning. Thing 19. Takeaway menus and leaflets. Paper comes through the door everywhere in the world. Japan gets plenty of it too, pushed into letterboxes daily. The difference is where it goes next. In a lot of Japanese homes, the post is opened, standing up, right by the door, with the paper recycling within reach. What matters is kept. The rest never gets carried further into the house. That's the whole trick, and it's a small one. Paper that reaches a kitchen table has already won. It'll be there in a week. Thing 20. Insurance papers for a policy that ended. Old paperwork is heavy in a way that has nothing to do with weight. Nobody wants to be the person who threw away the important document. So the safe choice looks like keeping all of it, forever. The Japanese habit is narrower. Keep the thing that proves something and let the explanation go. That means the certificate stays and the 20 pages describing it don't. The current policy stays and last year's doesn't. A file that only holds live documents can be checked in a minute. A file that holds everything can't be checked at all, which means it isn't really a file, it's a box. Thing 21. Notebooks with 4 pages used. A new notebook is a lovely thing. It gets started and abandoned around page 4 and put in a drawer with the others. Japan is famous for its stationery, and Japanese notebooks are genuinely beautiful. That's exactly why they get used to the end. The habit is to run one notebook at a time, and to keep using it until it's finished, however untidy it gets inside. Mixed up pages are fine. One finished book is worth more than 9 started ones. And it stops the quiet lie the drawer tells you, which is that the next notebook is the one where you'll finally get organized. Thing 22. A hill of unopened post. The entrance table collects it. Letters, bills, things from the bank, all face down and unopened, waiting for a better moment. Japanese homes tend not to let post get past the front door unopened. The genkan, the little sunken entrance where shoes come off, is a natural stopping point. You're standing there anyway. So the envelopes get opened where they arrive, and most of the paper never travels any further into the house. An unopened envelope isn't really paper. It's a decision you've agreed to make later, and later is where they gather. Thing 23. Maps and tickets from finished trips. The train pass, the folded map, the museum ticket, the little guidebook. They come home in a bag and get put in a drawer. They stay because the trip was good, and the paper feels like part of it. Japanese travelers keep something too, but usually one thing rather than all of it. Many carry a small book for collected stamps and seals from the places they visit. Temples and shrines and stations have their own, and each one is stamped or brushed into the book. The whole trip ends up in one volume that's genuinely worth opening again. Everything else was packaging. Thing 24. Clothes kept for a body you had 10 years ago. This one is in nearly every wardrobe in the West, and it's the heaviest thing in there. The trousers from before, the dress that fitted at the wedding, they're kept as a promise to yourself. Japanese wardrobes tend to be small, and small means the promise has to pay rent. There's a plain idea underneath it. A wardrobe is for dressing the person who's getting up tomorrow morning. Anything else is a message from your clothes about who you should have been, delivered every single day, while you're still half asleep and least able to argue with it. Thing 25. A whole year of clothes hanging at once. Most Western wardrobes hold every season at the same time. Coats next to shorts, all year round. Japan changes the wardrobe twice a year, on set dates, and the whole country does it together. It's called koromoge, which means changing clothes. Summer clothes come out around the 1st of June. Winter clothes come back around the 1st of October. It isn't a modern tidying idea. It goes back to the Heian period, more than 1,000 years ago, and the government fixed the 2 dates in 1873. There's even a gentle window of a week or 2 around each change, when either wardrobe is fine, so nobody is caught out by the weather. What it means day to day is that a Japanese wardrobe only ever holds one season. Half the clothes are asleep in a box somewhere, and the rail you look at every morning is half as crowded. Thing 26. 20 different kinds of hanger. Open a Western wardrobe and the hangers are a museum. Thin wire ones from the dry cleaner, chunky wooden ones, plastic ones in 4 colors, and the ones with the broken clips. Japanese wardrobes tend to run on one hanger. Repeated. It looks like a small thing, and it does something surprisingly large. When every hanger is the same, the clothes hang at the same height and the same depth. The rail reads as one clean line instead of a jumble, and you can see what's actually there. There's a practical part too. Matching hangers take up less width, so the same rail holds more without anything getting crushed. Thing 27. The wire hangers from the dry cleaner. These deserve their own place on the list, because they multiply. They arrive free with the clothes, they're too flimsy to be good, and they're too new looking to throw away, so they breed at the end of the rail. In Japan, they generally go straight back. Many dry cleaners take them, and there are collection boxes for them in shops. The thin plastic film goes too, and it should. Leaving a garment sealed in that film traps damp against the fabric, which is how a coat comes out of storage smelling of the cupboard. The clothes come home, the packaging does not. Thing 28. Clothes with the tags still on. Every wardrobe has 1 or 2. Bought, never worn, tag still attached, and the tag is the reason it stays. It feels like it's still new, so it feels like a waste to let it go. This is where mottainai gets misread all over the world. People use the word to mean keep it because letting go is wasteful. But the older meaning points the other way. A thing that's never used is a thing whose worth is going unused, and that's the waste the word is actually describing. A coat worn by somebody else is doing what a coat is for. A coat with a tag on it in a dark wardrobe isn't doing anything at all. Thing 29. The good coat that's too good to wear. There's often one thing in a Western wardrobe that's saved. It's the best item there, and it's kept for an occasion that keeps not arriving. Japanese homes do have things like this, and they are genuinely saved. A kimono is a real example. But the difference is that those things come out. They're worn at New Year, at ceremonies, at festivals, on days that arrive every single year without needing to be arranged. The saving has a date attached to it. A saved thing with no date isn't being saved, it's being stored, and there's a difference between the two that a wardrobe will never point out to you. Thing 30. Single socks kept in hope. The lost sock is a small universal comedy. One comes back from the wash without the other, and it gets kept, because the other one might turn up. It won't. It's been 6 months. Japanese laundry habits quietly prevent the whole problem. Washing happens most days, rather than in one big weekly load, so the pile is small enough that a missing sock is noticed immediately. Small socks are often pegged in pairs on the same little hanger with clips, which is a common thing on Japanese balconies, so they go out together and come back together. Nothing gets lost in a mountain, because there's never a mountain. Thing 31. The suit from a job you left. There's often one hanging at the far end of the rail, a suit, or a uniform, or a jacket with a company name on it. It belonged to work you don't do anymore. It stays for reasons that have nothing to do with clothing. It was expensive. It was worn on important days. Sometimes it's kept because of who you were while wearing it, which is a heavier thing than fabric. Japanese wardrobes are small enough that this rarely survives long, and there's a habit around it that's worth knowing. When somebody in Japan changes work, or retires, or finishes school, the clothes belonging to that chapter usually go at the same time. Not in anger, and not in a hurry. It's simply understood that the chapter is closed, and the wardrobe is allowed to know that. There's a related idea in Japanese life called kejime. It means drawing a clean line between one thing and the next, so they don't blur together. You see it everywhere once you know the word. It's in the bow at the start of a lesson and the bow at the end. It's in changing clothes when you come home. It's in the ceremony at the end of a school year. The clothes are part of that line. A wardrobe holding 3 former versions of you is a wardrobe that has to be argued with every morning. It quietly asks who you are today, and it does it before you've had coffee. Letting the suit go isn't a judgment on the years you wore it. Those happened. They're safe. They don't need a hanger to stay real. Thing 32. Shoes that hurt. Almost everyone owns a pair. They looked wonderful. They were not cheap. They have never once been comfortable. They get kept because the money was spent, and getting rid of them feels like admitting the money is gone. The money is gone either way. That happened at the till. Japan is unusually strict about this one, and the reason is structural rather than moral. Shoes come off at the door of a Japanese home, in the genkan, the small sunken entrance. That means shoes are stored at the entrance, and the entrance is small. There is no cupboard under the stairs to absorb a mistake. The shoe cabinet by the door has a fixed number of shelves, and when it's full, it's full. So, a pair of shoes in a Japanese home has to earn a specific slot, and the slot is visible to every person who walks in. There's also more walking in Japanese daily life than in most Western countries. People walk to the station, stand on the train, and walk again at the other end. Shoes that hurt are not a small annoyance there. They're a problem with the day. Painful shoes are a promise that things will be different later. Your feet already know they won't be. Thing 33. Clothes from other people's holidays. The t-shirt with a place name on it. The thing somebody brought back for you because they were thinking of you, which is genuinely kind, and which you have never worn. Guilt keeps it. It was a gift, so it feels ungrateful to move it on. Japan gives more of these than almost anywhere. Bringing back a gift from a trip is close to obligatory, and the gift has a name. It's called omiyage. But look closely at what Japanese omiyage usually is. It's almost always food. Beautifully boxed regional sweets, biscuits, crackers, pickles, tea. Something from that specific place, individually wrapped, meant to be shared at the office or with neighbors. Food is the perfect gift for a small home. It carries the thought, it gets enjoyed, and then it's gone. It never has to be stored, dusted, or felt guilty about in 5 years. The kindness was in the gesture, and the gesture completed itself. That's the quiet lesson hiding in a box of regional biscuits. A gift that disappears is not a lesser gift. It might be the most considerate kind there is. Thing 34. The pile of clothes that are not quite anything. Every wardrobe has a bottom layer. Not good enough to wear out, not bad enough to throw away. Old work clothes, stretched jumpers, things worn only at home. It isn't really a category. It's where failed clothes go to retire, and it grows because nothing ever leaves it. Japan has an actual category for home clothes, and giving it a name changes it completely. They're called heiagi, which simply means room clothes. Heiagi are chosen, not inherited from failure. A small set, comfortable, kept clean, worn at home in the evening. This connects to something bigger in Japanese homes. Outdoor clothes are outdoor clothes, and they come off when you get in, along with the shoes. The street doesn't get to sit on the sofa, so changing when you come home isn't laziness there. It's part of the same idea that keeps shoes at the door. The difference is small, and it's the whole thing. One house has 5 chosen items for being at home, the other has 30 failures, and picks from them in the dark. Thing 35. Underwear and socks worn long past their life. This is the least glamorous thing on the list, and it may be the most common. These items wear out slowly, so there's never a day when they obviously fail. They just get quietly worse, and get worn anyway, because replacing them is nobody's priority. Japan has a natural stopping point built into the year for this. There's a strong tradition of starting the new year fresh. The house gets a deep clean in late December, debts get settled before the year turns, and it's common to begin the 1st of January in new things. New underwear, new socks, sometimes new night clothes. Nothing ceremonial, just the small dignity of starting a year in something that hasn't been worn to nothing. It gives the whole category a date. Once a year, the worst of it goes, and the replacements arrive at the same time. That's the useful part. Things that wear out invisibly need a calendar, because they'll never announce themselves. Thing 36. Clothes for a life you do not actually live. Formal wear for events you don't attend. Sports clothing for a sport you tried once. Something dramatic bought for a version of your evenings that has never happened. These are the most expensive things in a wardrobe, and the least worn. Japanese homes handle this with renting, far more than Western ones do. Formal kimono are commonly rented for weddings and ceremonies, along with the dressing and the hair. Graduation outfits get rented. Formal morning clothes are rented too. Nobody thinks less of you for it. Renting is completely normal, because storing a garment worn once every 4 years in a small home makes no sense to anyone. The clothes come, they do their job beautifully, and they go back. What stays in the wardrobe is the life you actually have. Everything else can be borrowed on the day you need it, which is the only day it was ever going to matter. Thing 37. Toys a child has grown out of. The child moved on 18 months ago. The toys did not. They stay because a parent remembers the child at that age, and the toy is a piece of it. That's real, and it's worth saying plainly rather than pretending it's about tidiness. Japanese families face the same feeling in much smaller rooms, and one thing they do differently is let the child decide. Children in Japan are given real responsibility early. 6-year-olds ride the train to school, clean their own classroom, and serve each other lunch. A child who cleans a classroom every day understands that space is shared and finite, so a child deciding which toys stay isn't unusual there. It's the same skill. At home, there's also a route out that carries no guilt. Toys are passed to younger cousins and neighbors, given to nurseries, or sold through Japan's enormous second-hand market. A toy going to a smaller child isn't a loss. It's the toy carrying on doing what it was for. And the memory of your child at 4 does not live in a plastic thing in a cupboard. It never did. Thing 38. Every drawing a child has made. Children draw constantly. A single year produces hundreds of pieces of paper, and it feels impossible to choose between them. So most families keep all of it, in a bag, in the loft, unlooked at. The Japanese approach is to choose a few and treat those few properly. A chosen drawing gets dated and put somewhere it can actually be seen. Some families frame one and swap it with the seasons, in the same spirit as the tokonoma, the small alcove in a traditional Japanese room that holds one scroll and one flower at a time. The alcove is the whole philosophy in one piece of architecture. It's a space designed to display exactly one thing, so the thing gets looked at. 100 drawings in a bag are not being kept. They're being stored, which is a different verb, and nobody has looked at them since the day they went in. One on the wall is being kept. The child sees it too, and knows which one you chose. Thing 39. Broken toys waiting to be fixed. The wheel came off. The battery cover is missing. It's been in the drawer for a year, waiting for a repair that everybody has quietly agreed will not happen. Japan does repair things, genuinely and often, which makes the contrast sharper rather than softer. The country has a whole idea about mended objects. Kintsugi is the famous one, where broken pottery is joined with lacquer and gold, so the repair is visible, and the bowl becomes more valuable, not less. But kintsugi only means something because the bowl actually gets repaired. The Japanese test is honest and quick. Either the thing is worth mending, in which case it gets mended soon, or it isn't, in which case it goes. What doesn't happen is the third option, which is where most Western drawers live. The thing is neither mended nor released. It just waits, taking up room, wearing a small, permanent label that says you didn't get round to it. A repair that's never going to happen isn't a plan. It's a way of not deciding. Thing 40. Toys that came free with food. Small plastic figures from meals, cereal boxes, and party bags. Nobody bought them on purpose. Nobody would. They arrive constantly. They're never valued, and they're strangely hard to throw away because a child noticed them once. Japan gets these too. It's a country of small collectible things, and the toys that come with snacks are often genuinely well made. What's different is the exit. Japanese rubbish sorting is strict, and small plastic items have to be separated into the right category on the right day. That sounds like a chore, and it is, but it also means every small object in the house eventually meets a moment where somebody has to decide which bag it belongs in. Sorting forces contact. You cannot sort what you refuse to look at. In a home where nothing ever has to be sorted, small things accumulate for years without anyone once holding them and asking whether they should still be there. Thing 41. The second and third of the same toy. Duplicates appear without anyone planning them. 2 of the same book, 3 near-identical soft toys, a second set of blocks bought because the first couldn't be found. That last one matters, and it's worth sitting with. A duplicate is very often the price of disorganization. You buy the second because the first was invisible. Japanese storage habits attack this directly, and the principle is simply that everything visible gets used and everything buried gets bought again. That's why Japanese organizers care so much about whether an item can be seen in one look, not for neatness, for this exact reason. A cupboard you can see into is a cupboard that stops you spending money. And a child with two identical toys plays with neither of them properly because the value of a toy comes partly from it being the one. Thing 42. Baby equipment kept for the next one. The cot, the high chair, the sterilizing kit, the pram. Large, expensive, and hard to let go of because there might be another child. Sometimes there is. Often there isn't, and the equipment waits years in a garage while the answer stays undecided. Japan leans heavily on renting and on second-hand here, and the reason is the same as always. Japanese homes have nowhere to put a spare pram for 4 years. Baby equipment is commonly rented for exactly the months it's needed, then returned. What's bought is often bought used and sold on again quickly, through a market that's enormous and completely unembarrassed. Buying second-hand in Japan carries no shame at all. The shops are clean, well-lit and organized like any other shop. So the equipment moves in a circle, and no single household has to be the one that stores it. The question isn't whether you might need it again, it's whether you should be the warehouse. Thing 43. School bags from every previous year. Western children usually get a new school bag every year or two. The old ones go into a cupboard, still usable, never used. Japan solved this with one object, and it's one of the most quietly impressive things in the country. Japanese children carry a randoseru, a firm leather backpack, and they carry the same one for all 6 years of elementary school. It's built for that. The bags are tested for bending, for light, for wear, so they survive 6 years of daily use. They're also designed to adapt as the child grows. A child gains nearly 30 centimeters over those 6 years, and the harness moves so the bag still fits the same body it started on. Then, at the end, the empty bag comes home on graduation day. It's a real marker in Japanese life, the boundary between protected childhood and going out into the wider world. One bag, 6 years, no cupboard of retired ones, because there's only ever been the one, and by the end, it's earned its place completely. Thing 44. Party bag contents, still in the party bag. The bag comes home from someone's birthday. It goes on a shelf. Nobody opens it, nobody throws it away, and 18 months later, it's still there with the cake in it. It's a tiny thing, and it's on this list because it's the perfect example of an object nobody has ever decided about. It was never chosen, it was never wanted, it simply arrived, and arriving was enough to earn it a permanent place. Japanese homes have far fewer of these, and it comes back to the entrance again. Things that come into a Japanese home get dealt with near the door, on the way in, while they're still in your hands, and still obviously not yours. An object that reaches a shelf has effectively been adopted. Nobody adopted it. It just walked in behind somebody, and the house never questioned it again. Thing 45. Gifts you never liked, kept out of guilt. This is one of the heaviest categories in any home, and almost nobody admits to it. The ornament from a relative, the vase that doesn't suit anything, kept because the person who gave it might notice, or because moving it on feels like moving them on. Japan is a country of relentless gift-giving. There are 2 formal seasons for it, Otsugan in summer and Osibo in winter, when gifts go to bosses, teachers, doctors, and relatives. Which means Japanese households would drown in objects, if the gifts were objects. They mostly aren't. The classic seasonal gift is consumable. Good fruit, sweets, tea, soap, cooking oil, beer, practical things that get used up. The whole system is built so that generosity flows constantly without anybody's shelves filling. That's the thing worth taking from it. The kindness was in the giving, and the giving is already finished. It happened. It was received. The object was only ever the messenger, and the message has been delivered. Thing 46. Letters from people you no longer know. In a box somewhere, there are letters and cards from people who have drifted out of your life. A friend from school, someone you worked with for 2 years, a person you were close to once and haven't spoken to in a decade. They're kept because they're handwritten, and handwriting feels like a piece of a person in a way a printed thing never does. Japan understands that better than most places. Handwriting still carries real weight there. New Year cards are often written by hand, formal thanks are written by hand, and a handwritten note is understood to cost the writer something. But Japanese homes are small, and small homes force a question that big homes let you avoid. The question isn't whether the letter was meaningful. It was. The question is whether you're keeping a relationship or keeping paper. There's a Japanese idea that helps here, from the tea ceremony, and it's one of the loveliest phrases in the language. Ichigo ichi. It means one time, one meeting. The thinking behind it is that every gathering is unrepeatable. The people in this room, this weather, this particular afternoon, will never assemble in exactly this way again. So you give it your full attention while it's happening, because it will not be back. That idea cuts both ways, and the second way is the useful one. If the meeting was complete in itself, it doesn't need a receipt. The friendship happened. It was real for as long as it was real. A shoebox in a wardrobe isn't holding it in place, and letting the box go doesn't reach backwards and undo any of it. Some people keep a few, one letter from each person who mattered, in one small box that closes. That's a kept thing. 40 letters nobody has read since they arrived is a different object entirely. Thing 47. A whole life's belongings, kept exactly as they were. When somebody dies, their things become almost impossible to touch. The house stays as it was, clothes stay in the wardrobe, a room gets closed and left. Sometimes that lasts a few months. Sometimes it lasts 20 years. This is the hardest thing on this list, and it deserves to be handled gently rather than briskly. Japan has something most Western countries don't, which is a formal, respected practice for exactly this moment. It's called ihin seiri, which means sorting the belongings left behind. There are professional companies who do it. They're trained, they work carefully, and they treat the objects with real ceremony rather than clearing a house out. Items that can't be kept are often taken to a temple or shrine to be blessed before they're released. The letting go is given a ritual, so it isn't just a bin bag on a Tuesday. That's the part worth understanding, and it's the part missing almost everywhere else. The reason a dead person's belongings sit untouched for years is rarely that the family wants to keep all of it. It's that there's no acceptable way to begin, and no moment that gives permission. Japan built the permission into a practice, with people who arrive and hold the process for you. What families keep afterwards tends to be small and chosen. A few objects that genuinely carry the person, often kept near the household altar, where the family remembers them. The rest is released, with respect, on purpose, not lost, released, which is a different word. Thing 48. Tickets, wristbands and stubs. The festival wristband still on the bedside table, ticket stubs in a drawer, a paper bracelet from a concert 3 summers ago. They're kept because they're proof. You were there, and here is the evidence. Japan collects proof too, and does it far more deliberately, which is why the Japanese version doesn't scatter. Travelers carry a small book for collected stamps. Temples, shrines, castles, and even railway stations have their own seal, and each one is stamped or brushed into the book, often by hand, sometimes with beautiful calligraphy over the top. By the end of a trip, or a life of trips, there's one book. It sits on a shelf, it's genuinely beautiful, and people actually take it down and look through it. Compare that to a drawer of faded stubs. Both are records of the same kinds of days. Only one of them ever gets opened. The difference isn't sentiment. Both people were equally moved by the day. The difference is that one culture gave the memory a container, and the other let it land wherever it fell. A memory with no container doesn't get treasured. It gets stored, then lost, then eventually thrown away by somebody else who doesn't know what it was. If a thing is worth keeping, it's worth keeping somewhere you'd actually find it. Thing 49. A wedding dress in a sealed box. It's the most expensive thing many people ever wear, worn once and then boxed and stored for decades. It's kept for a daughter who may not want it, in a style that will have moved on, in a size that may not fit. Everybody knows this. It stays anyway. Japan mostly avoids the situation, because Japanese wedding clothes are usually rented. A traditional wedding kimono is an extraordinary object, and it can cost more than a car. almost nobody buys one. It's rented for the day, along with the dressing, because putting one on properly takes a trained person and a considerable amount of time. Many Japanese brides change outfits more than once during the day, sometimes into a western white dress as well. All of it rented, all of it returned. Nobody experiences this as a compromise. It's simply how it's done, and it means the most beautiful garment of your life doesn't spend the next 40 years in a box in a loft. There's a broader idea underneath, and it applies well beyond weddings. Owning a thing and having a thing are not the same. You had the dress. You wore it on the day it was for. That was the whole point of it, and it's already complete. Thing 50. School trophies and certificates. The swimming certificate, the small football trophy, a rosette from a sports day in another century. They're kept because they were earned, and throwing away something earned feels like denying it happened. Japanese schools produce plenty of these too, but Japanese homes tend not to display them for decades, and the reason is a difference in how achievement is understood. Japanese school life leans heavily on the group. Classes clean their own rooms together, serve each other lunch, and take part in a sports day where the emphasis sits on the team. The reward for doing well is often the moment itself, the ceremony, the bow, the acknowledgement in front of everyone. It's public, it's complete, and it happens there. So the certificate is a record of a moment, not the moment. And the moment already happened, in a hall, in front of people who saw it. There's a practical part too. A traditional Japanese room has one place for display, the tokonoma alcove, and it holds one thing at a time. A house with one display space cannot become a museum of its own past. It can only ever show what matters now, which is worth sitting with for a second, because a shelf of small trophies from 30 years ago is a room facing backwards, and the person living in it has to walk past that every day. Thing 51. The gadget bought for one recipe. The spiralizer, the bread machine, the ice cream maker used twice in a good summer, then never again. They're bought during a burst of intention, and they're kept because they still work and were expensive. Japanese kitchens are usually tiny. A Tokyo apartment kitchen can be a single counter with 2 burners and almost no cupboard. That's not a hardship so much as a filter. Every object has to justify a specific piece of a very small space, permanently. What survives that filter is interesting. Japanese kitchens tend to hold a small number of tools that each do many jobs, and do them well. A good knife, a donabe, the clay pot that goes straight on the heat and does soups, rice, and a whole meal at the table, a steamer, a rice cooker, which in Japan is genuinely the center of the kitchen and used every single day. Notice the pattern. The things that stay are the things used constantly, not the things that do one impressive trick. A single-purpose machine is a bet that you'll want that exact thing often enough to justify the space it takes for the next 10 years. Most of those bets lose, and the loss is quiet. It sits at the back of a cupboard, being slightly in the way of everything you actually reach for. Thing 52. 12 mugs for 2 people. Cups multiply faster than almost anything else. Free ones, gift ones, souvenir ones, the good set, and 4 survivors from sets that broke. 2 people drink from 2 of them, the rest occupy an entire cupboard. Japan does this completely differently, and it's one of the loveliest habits in the country. In a Japanese household, people often have their own cup, not a matching set shared between everyone, but a specific cup that belongs to a specific person. The same applies to rice bowls and to chopsticks. Yours are yours, someone else's are theirs. They're often different sizes and different patterns on purpose, so you can tell at a glance. It sounds like a small domestic detail, and it changes the whole cupboard. If everyone has one, the number of cups in the house is the number of people in the house, plus a few for visitors. That's it. There's no drift, because there's no category called spare. There's something warm in it too. Handing someone their cup rather than a cup is a small daily act of knowing them. A cupboard of 12 anonymous mugs can't do that. It's just storage with handles. Thing 53. Knives that are not sharp. Most Western kitchens have a drawer or a block with 5 or 6 knives in it, and not one of them is properly sharp. They're kept because they're knives, and knives feel like permanent objects rather than things with a condition. Japan is probably the most serious knife culture on earth, and the seriousness shows up as maintenance rather than collection. Japanese kitchen knives are traditionally sharpened on a whetstone, a flat block used with water. It's a real skill, taught and practiced, and many home cooks do it themselves. A knife that's cared for that way lasts for decades and gets better to use. Some are passed down. The important part is what that habit does to the number of knives. If sharpening takes real effort, you don't want 6. You want 2 or 3 that are genuinely good, and you keep those in excellent condition. Effort, in this case, is protective. It stops the drawer filling. There's a safety point too, and every Japanese cook will make it. A blunt knife is the dangerous one. It slips, because you have to push harder to make it work. So the drawer of dull knives isn't just an inconvenience. It's 5 objects taking up space while quietly being worse and slightly more dangerous than one good one would be. Thing 54. Cutlery. For 12, in a house of 2. The drawer holds enough for a dinner party that hasn't happened in 9 years. Somewhere behind it is a second set, for the parties that would have been even larger. It's kept for hospitality, which is a good instinct. It's just aimed at a version of your life that isn't running. Japanese homes hold far less of this, and there's a specific reason beyond space. Japanese eating is often built around sharing rather than serving. A pot in the middle of the table, several small dishes, and everyone taking from them. Nabe, the winter hot pot, works exactly this way. That style needs a lot of small bowls and very little of everything else. There's no need for a full formal set per person, because the meal isn't structured as a plate each. And when Japanese families do host something large, they very often go out. Restaurants and rented rooms handle the gathering, and nobody expects a home to contain the equipment for 20 people. There's a phrase worth knowing here. Japanese hospitality is called mottainai, and it's usually explained as anticipating what a guest needs before they ask. Notice what it isn't. It isn't owning enough forks. The care is in the attention, the warmth of the room, the fact that the bath was heated for them. None of that lives in a drawer. A house doesn't become welcoming by storing equipment for a party. It becomes welcoming when someone walks in and something has clearly been prepared for them, and that can be true in a very small flat with 4 bowls. Thing 55. The vases that came with flowers. Flowers arrive in a vase, or with one. The flowers die. The vase joins the others, in the back of a cupboard, and the collection grows one bouquet at a time. Nobody has ever bought most of them, and nobody would. Japan has one of the most developed flower cultures in the world, and it produces almost no spare vases at all. Japanese flower arranging is called ikebana. It's a proper discipline with schools and teachers going back centuries, and its whole aesthetic runs the opposite way to a full bunch. An ikebana arrangement is usually a very small number of stems, sometimes 3, sometimes 1 branch and 1 flower. The empty space around them is treated as part of the arrangement, rather than a gap to be filled. That kind of arrangement needs one considered vessel, chosen for that arrangement, not a cupboard of glass cylinders in 6 sizes. There's also the tokonoma again, the display alcove, which traditionally holds one seasonal arrangement at a time, one place, one arrangement, changed as the year moves. So the flower habit in Japan produces a small number of good containers that get used constantly, instead of a large number of accidental ones that never get used at all. And it points at something true about a lot of this list. A cupboard fills with spares when the house has no clear idea of how many it actually needs. Thing 56. Cookbooks nobody has cooked from. They're beautiful objects, and they're bought with real intention. A shelf of them, and perhaps 4 recipes ever made between the lot. They stay because a cookbook feels like a promise about the kind of cooking you'd like to do. Japanese home cooking mostly doesn't run on cookbooks, and understanding why explains the shelf. The everyday Japanese meal has a simple, repeating structure. It's often described as ichiju sansai, meaning 1 soup and 3 dishes served with rice. It isn't a recipe, it's a shape. Rice, a soup, a main dish, and a couple of small vegetable dishes on the side. Once you know the shape, dinner isn't a decision about which recipe to attempt. It's a matter of filling 4 familiar slots with whatever is in season and to hand. That's why so much Japanese home cooking gets passed on by watching rather than reading, and why the shelf of instruction books never builds up. There's something freeing in that, and it isn't really about Japan at all. A person with one reliable structure cooks more often than a person with 40 books of unattempted projects. The books were never the obstacle, but they do sit there, quietly, being a list of things you haven't done. Thing 57. A bag full of other bags. This may be the single most universal object in the world. Under a sink, in a cupboard, a carrier bag stuffed with more carrier bags, breeding steadily. Everyone has one. Almost nobody chose to have one. Japan produces a spectacular amount of packaging, so this could easily be worse there than anywhere. It isn't, and the reason is the sorting. Japanese household rubbish is separated properly, with different categories collected on different fixed days. Plastics are their own stream, and in many places they need to be clean. Which means a plastic bag in a Japanese home is never in limbo. It's either being used, or it's in the plastics bag for Thursday. There's no third state, and that third state is precisely what the bag of bags is. It's a pile of objects that are neither in use nor released, held in a permanent maybe. Japan also charges for shopping bags now, which pushed most people onto a folded, reusable one kept in a handbag or pocket. Those little folding bags are everywhere. The wider point stands well beyond bags. Almost every category on this list is really the same thing, which is a pile of decisions nobody has made. Sorting isn't tidying. Sorting is deciding, done in small amounts, on a schedule, so it never has to be done in one overwhelming afternoon. Thing 58. Sauce sachets from takeaway meals. Soy sauce, ketchup, mustard, chili, salt, the little wet wipes. They come with food, they get put in a drawer, and they stay there for years past the point of being any good. They're kept because they're free, and free things feel wasteful to throw away. Japan hands out a lot of these too. A convenience store meal comes with chopsticks, a wet towel, and small sachets as a matter of course. But there's a habit at the counter that changes everything, and it's become common in recent years. Staff ask whether you want the chopsticks and the cutlery, and plenty of people say no. That's the whole intervention. The refusal happens at the door, not in the drawer. It's worth noticing how much easier that is than the alternative. Saying no to a plastic fork takes half a second, and no emotion at all. Throwing away a drawer of 200 sachets 3 years later takes an afternoon and feels faintly shameful. The same object, the same decision, at two different moments, with completely different costs. Almost everything in a cluttered home was cheap and easy to refuse on the day it arrived, and has become expensive and difficult to release ever since. Thing 59. Paint tins with an inch left in the bottom. Every garage and cupboard has them, half a litre of a colour from a room that was painted 11 years ago, kept for touching up. They're kept because the colour is unrepeatable and the paint might be needed. Meanwhile, the paint has separated and dried into something unusable, so the touch-up was never actually possible. Japan handles this at the level of what happens to a thing when it stops being useful. And the answer is that letting go of large items is not free. Big waste in Japan is called sodai gomi, and getting rid of it means booking a collection and paying a fee for the sticker that goes on the item. That cost is small, and it's enough to change behavior completely. When getting something out of the house has a price and a date attached, people stop letting things drift into the house in the first place. You buy the amount of paint the room needs, because the leftover is not free storage, it's a future fee. It cuts the other way too. Because there's a proper route out, things do actually leave. They don't sit for a decade because nobody knows what to do with them. A home fills up when arriving is easy and leaving is hard. Japan made leaving slightly expensive and completely clear, and the result is that far less arrives. Thing 60. 2 of every tool because the first was lost. 2 hammers. 3 tape measures. A drawer with 4 sets of screwdrivers, none of them complete. Nobody meant to own any of the duplicates. They were bought at the moment of needing one, when the first couldn't be found. This is the clearest example on the whole list of disorder costing money rather than just space. Japanese homes attack it with a rule that sounds almost too simple to matter. Everything has one fixed home, and it goes back to that home after use. Children learn it at school, where they put their own things away in a specific place every day, and it carries into adult life. The effect isn't neatness. It's that nothing is ever missing, so nothing is ever bought twice. There's a phrase used in Japanese workplaces for this, siton, which means putting things in order so they can be found immediately when needed. It's one of the steps in the system Japanese factories use to keep a workspace working. The reason it matters at home is that a tool you cannot find does not exist. You own it, and it does you no good whatsoever, and you will pay again for the same object. A tidy drawer isn't about being tidy. It's about not buying the same screwdriver for the fourth time. Thing 61, the bicycle nobody rides. It's in the garage, or the hallway, or chained up outside with 2 flat tires. It was going to be a new habit. It stays because it was expensive, and because giving it up feels like giving up on the version of you who cycles. Japan is a genuine cycling country. Bicycles are everywhere, used by everyone, for shopping and school runs and getting to the station. And an unused bicycle in Japan costs money in a way it doesn't elsewhere. Bicycles have to be registered. Parking at stations is often paid, and leaving a bike where it shouldn't be can get it impounded, with a fee to get it back. So a bicycle in Japan is either in use, or it's a small ongoing expense doing nothing. That clarity is the gift. Most Western clutter is free to keep, which is exactly why it's kept. The cost is real but invisible, paid in space and in the low hum of walking past it every day. When a thing's cost becomes visible, the decision makes itself, usually within a week. Thing 62. Sports equipment from one enthusiastic summer. The tennis racket. The golf clubs. The weights that live under the bed. Bought during a burst of intention. Used for a season. Kept for a decade. They're kept because letting them go feels like admitting the intention has died. Japan has an enormous second-hand market, and it removes almost all of the sting from this particular decision. Selling used things in Japan carries no embarrassment at all. There are large, clean, second-hand chains, and shops that specialize in used sports gear, musical instruments, cameras and clothes. The shops are bright and well-organized, and buying from them is completely ordinary rather than a last resort. What that does psychologically is worth more than the money. If an object can be sold easily and will clearly go on to be used by somebody who wants it, letting go stops feeling like waste. It becomes a handover, and that is the honest end of most of these items. The racket isn't going in a skip, it's going to somebody who's about to have the summer you had, which is the best possible outcome for a racket. The intention you had was real. It just belongs to a season that's finished, and the equipment doesn't have to sit in the dark being a reminder of it. Thing 63. Camping gear used once. The tent, the sleeping bags, the little stove, bought for a trip that happened, enjoyed, and never repeated. It takes up an enormous amount of room for something used across 4 nights of one summer. Japan camps happily, and it rents heavily. Campsites commonly rent tents and equipment on site, so a family can go for a weekend without owning anything at all. The same logic runs through Japanese life in a way that's worth noticing. Skis are rented at the mountain. Formal clothes are rented for the ceremony. Baby equipment is rented for the months it's needed. Behind all of it sits one question that small homes force you to ask, and large homes let you dodge. How often? Really? Not how much did it cost, and not whether you enjoyed it. How often? A thing used 4 nights a year is renting a piece of your home for the other 361, and it pays no rent at all. Thing 64. Garden furniture with no garden. A folding table, 4 chairs, a parasol. They came from a flat that had a balcony, or a house that had a lawn, and they've moved twice since. They're kept for a garden that might exist one day. Japanese homes take outdoor space seriously without needing much of it. A tiny courtyard, a strip beside a door, a few pots by the entrance, all arranged with real care. There's a phrase for a garden small enough to fit in a gap between buildings. It's a tsuboniwa, a courtyard garden, sometimes only a couple of square meters, and it's treated as a proper garden rather than a leftover. What matters is that it's designed for the space that exists, not stored in hope of a bigger one. Furniture waiting for a future house is one of the purest examples on this list. It isn't serving your life. It's serving a life you're not living, in a home you don't have, and it's charging you rent in the one you do. Thing 65. Car accessories for a car you sold. The roof box, the phone cradle, the boot liner cut to fit a shape you no longer own, half a shelf in the garage. These survive because they're specific. Something so precisely made feels valuable, even when the thing it was made for is gone. Japan has an unusually strict relationship with cars that quietly prevents this. In most Japanese cities, you cannot register a car without proving you have somewhere to park it. That single rule shapes everything. Car ownership is a deliberate decision with a fixed cost and a fixed space attached, not something that drifts. And when a car goes, the things belonging to it go with it, because the space they were occupying was never spare in the first place. A fitted accessory for a vanished object is one of the loneliest things in a house. It's perfectly made, in excellent condition, and it fits nothing that exists. Thing 66. Materials left over from a finished job. Half a bag of cement, 6 tiles, a length of skirting board, wood that was going to be useful. They're kept because they might be needed, and because throwing away perfectly good material feels wrong. That instinct is genuinely mottainai, and it's the right instinct. Japan takes it seriously. But look at what Japan actually does with leftover material, because it's different from storing it. Offcuts get used. Scrap wood becomes small shelves and boxes. Old cloth gets stitched into new cloth, a practice called borrow, where layer after layer of patching eventually makes something beautiful and durable. The material is put back to work, quickly, while it's still material and hasn't yet become sentimental. That's the distinction the garage misses. Keeping something because it's useful is only true if you use it. Otherwise, the word useful has quietly turned into the word someday, and someday is not a plan. Thing 67. Enough decorations to fill a room in storage. Boxes of them. Lights, ornaments, a tree, garlands, the ones that don't work, and the ones from a color scheme abandoned in 2011. For 11 months of the year they're stored. For 1 month they're out, then they go back. Japan decorates for the new year rather than for December, and the difference in scale is remarkable. A traditional New Year decoration is small, a kadomatsu of pine and bamboo by the door, a shimenawa, a twisted rope with white paper hung at the entrance, a small arrangement inside. They go up in the last days of December, and here's the important part. They come down in early January, and traditionally they're taken to a shrine and burned. They aren't stored, they're released, and new ones are made the following year. So the whole cycle produces almost no permanent storage at all, and the decoration means more rather than less, because it's genuinely of that year and not a box of the same objects returning. Thing 68. Decorations for festivals you do not keep. Bunting for a holiday you don't observe. Themed plates from a party years ago. Seasonal things bought in a supermarket at the moment they were cheapest. In January, for a next year that has now passed several times. They're kept because they were bought for an occasion, and occasions come round. Japan has a great many seasonal displays, and almost all of them are tied to specific dates that genuinely arrive. Dolls come out for Hinamatsuri in March and are put away within days, because tradition says leaving them out too long is unlucky, which is a wonderfully practical superstition. Carp streamers fly for Children's Day in May. Bamboo and paper wishes appear for Tanabata in July. Each one has a date to arrive and a date to leave, and the leaving date is as fixed as the arriving one. That's the piece missing from most Western seasonal storage. Things have a day they come out. Almost nothing has a day it goes for good. Thing 69. Artificial flowers. They never die, which is the selling point, and it's also the problem. Nothing about them ever prompts a decision. Real flowers make you notice time passing. Fake ones sit on a shelf, gathering dust, for a decade. Japanese aesthetics run hard against this, and it's one of the deepest ideas in the culture. Japanese beauty is bound up with things not lasting. The cherry blossom is loved precisely because it falls within about a week. If it stayed all year, nobody would stand under it. There's a word for the feeling, mono no aware, which means something like a gentle sadness at how things pass, and it's considered a good feeling rather than a sad one. An arrangement in a Japanese home is usually seasonal, small, and temporary. It's replaced as the year moves, so the room always says what month it is. A permanent bunch of fabric flowers says nothing about any month. It's been saying the same nothing since you bought it. Thing 70. Ornaments displayed out of duty. The figurine from a relative. The thing on the shelf that isn't to your taste but is on display because they might visit. It's a strange arrangement when you say it out loud. Part of your home has been given over to the opinion of someone who isn't there. Japanese display space is deliberately tiny, which makes the whole question easier. The tokonoma alcove holds one scroll and one arrangement. That's the display. A home with one display space can't hold anybody's duty objects, because the space is obviously spoken for. And nobody is offended, because everybody knows how the alcove works. That's the useful part. The problem isn't the ornament. It's a house with unlimited shelf space and no agreed rule about what shelves are for, so anything that arrives can claim one and keep it forever. Thing 71. Fairy lights where half the bulbs have gone. They get put back in the box each year with the fault unfixed, and taken out the next year with the fault still there, and used anyway. They're kept because they mostly work, and mostly working is the most dangerous condition an object can be in. Anything broken gets dealt with. Anything fine gets used. It's the things in between that live forever, because they never quite trigger a decision. Japan is good at repairing, and equally good at ending things properly when repair isn't sensible. Electrical items have their own disposal route, and it costs something, so the question gets asked. The half-working object is the true enemy of a calm house. It isn't one big problem, it's 40 small ones, none of them urgent, all of them slightly in the way. Thing 72. Cards still standing long after the day. Birthday cards on the mantelpiece in March. A card from an occasion 3 months gone, still up, because taking it down feels slightly cold. Japanese New Year cards have a natural end. They arrive on the 1st, they're enjoyed, and the season closes. There's a customary period for them, and after that they're done. Almost every Japanese seasonal thing works like this. It has an opening date and a closing date, and the closing date is respected as much as the opening one. That's the design flaw in a mantelpiece. Things arrive on it, and nothing in the arrangement ever tells them to leave, so the room slowly becomes a record of past events rather than a place for the current one. Thing 73. Books kept to show that you have read them. A shelf of books, many unread, some read once and never opened again, all of them staying because a book is a hard thing to let go of. Books carry identity in a way few objects do. Getting rid of one feels like getting rid of a piece of who you are. Japan reads enormously and has built something remarkable to handle the flow. There's a huge second-hand book trade there, called Furahon, going back centuries. The modern version is everywhere. Large second-hand chains buy books over the counter, sort them, and sell them on, cleanly and without ceremony. That changes what a finished book is. It isn't a possession you must keep or a thing you must throw away. It's something in circulation that you happen to be holding for a while. There's also a lovely Japanese word for buying books faster than you read them, tsundoku, which describes the pile of unread ones by the bed. The Japanese have not solved this. They just gave it a name, affectionately. The difference is what happens to the pile eventually. In Japan, there's an easy, respectable route for it to move on and be read by somebody else. Thing 74. Discs with nothing to play them on. Shelves of CDs and DVDs in a house with no disc player. They stay because there's music and film on them that was loved. The content is safe. It exists elsewhere. The discs are packaging for something that has already been moved. Japan holds on to physical media more than most countries, genuinely, and the second-hand market absorbs it constantly. Whole shops exist for used discs, and they're busy. So the same object exists in both places, but in one of them it's moving, and in the other it's parked. That's most of this list, in a sentence. The difference between a full home and a calm one is rarely what comes in, it's whether there's a working way out. Thing 75. Manuals for things that no longer exist. Booklets for a washing machine replaced in 2014. Instructions in 9 languages for an object that left the house years ago. They survive because paperwork feels official, and official things feel like they should be kept. The test is quick, and nobody ever runs it. Does the object this describes still exist in my home? That's it. No judgment, no memory, no guilt. It's a yes or a no, and it takes 1 second per booklet. A drawer that's never been through that question isn't a records drawer. It's an archive of appliances you no longer own, kept in case they come back. Thing 76. Games with pieces missing. The board game that can't be played because the dice went years ago. The jigsaw that's missing at least one piece, discovered the last time somebody tried. They're kept because they were fun once, and because the missing piece might turn up. Japanese homes have very little room for boxed games, and the games that are common there tend to survive this problem naturally. Shogi and Go are boards with pieces that live in one small box, and a missing piece is immediately obvious rather than discovered a year later. The broader point is about honesty. An incomplete thing kept in the hope of becoming complete is a small, ongoing lie the cupboard tells you. Every time you see the box, part of you registers that it doesn't work and files it under later. That costs something, in a very quiet way, every single time. Thing 77. Magazines kept for one article. The issue with the recipe in it. The one with the piece you meant to reread. 20 of them, for 20 single pages. Japanese magazines are famously beautiful and famously disposable, and the recycling day handles them with the rest of the paper. But there's a habit worth borrowing that has nothing to do with Japan being tidy. If one page matters, keep the page. Cut it out, put it where such things go, and let the other 140 pages leave. Almost nobody does this, and the reason is interesting. Cutting the page requires a decision about which page matters, and keeping the whole magazine lets you avoid making it. The stack isn't storage. It's a stack of postponed decisions, each one weighing about 400 grams. Thing 78. Collections started and abandoned. The stamps, the coins, the model kits, the box of yarn from a knitting phase. Started with real enthusiasm, stopped, kept. These are heavy because a collection is a stated intention. Letting it go feels like a verdict on yourself. Japan is a nation of collectors and hobbyists at an extraordinary level of dedication. It's also a nation where hobby equipment moves briskly through specialist second-hand shops. Both things are true at once, and that's the point. Taking a hobby seriously and letting go of a finished one are not opposites. The enthusiasm was real. It gave you something at the time. It doesn't owe you a lifetime of shelf space to prove it was genuine. And somebody currently in the middle of that enthusiasm would love to have your materials at exactly the moment when they'd be used properly. Thing 79. Textbooks from a course that ended. Heavy, expensive, and out of date within a few years. Kept because of what they cost and what they represent. Japanese students sell theirs, constantly, through the same second-hand system that handles everything else. There are shops that specialize in exactly this, near universities. A textbook is a tool for a period of study. When the study is finished, the tool has finished too, and somebody starting that course next year needs it far more than your shelf does. What you learned stayed with you. It isn't stored in the book. Thing 80. Sheet music for an instrument nobody plays. Often the instrument is gone and the music is still there. A folder of it, in a drawer, from lessons that stopped in school. Japan has an enormous amateur music culture, and instruments circulate heavily secondhand. The pattern by now is familiar. Where there's an easy, dignified route out, things travel. Where there isn't, they settle. Music written for an instrument that left the house years ago is about as settled as an object can get. Thing 81. Cushions that are only for looking at. The sofa has 6, and 2 of them are moved onto the floor every evening so people can actually sit down. They're decoration pretending to be furniture, and everybody in the house quietly works around them. Japanese homes use a floor cushion called a zabuton. It's flat, firm, and unambiguously for sitting on. And crucially, zabuton get put away. They're brought out for guests or for sitting, then stacked in a cupboard so they don't occupy the room when nobody's using them. That's the difference. One cushion is used and stored. The other is permanently in the way of the thing it's meant to be part of. Thing 82. 3 sets of bedding for every bed. Sheets, covers, and pillowcases, in quantities nobody needs. A cupboard given over entirely to fabric. They accumulate because bedding is bought in sets, and old sets are never released when new ones arrive. Japanese bedding takes up dramatically less room because a futon is folded away every morning into the oshier cupboard. That daily action is the whole discipline. Something folded away every single day cannot quietly multiply, because you'd notice immediately. 2 sets per bed is enough for anybody. 1 on, 1 in the wash. Thing 83. Curtains from a house you left. They don't fit these windows. They've been in a bag in a cupboard through 2 moves. kept because they were expensive and might fit somewhere eventually. Japanese homes are far more standardized than Western ones. Rooms are measured in tatami mats, and window and door sizes follow common patterns, so soft furnishings genuinely do transfer between homes. Which is exactly why they don't pile up. If a thing fits the next place, it goes there and gets used. If it doesn't, that's obvious immediately rather than hypothetically. Fabric waiting for a hypothetical window is fabric that has been out of use for years while looking like it might be needed tomorrow. Thing 84. Rugs layered over rugs. One rug over carpet, another over that, covering a mark, a runner in the hall that slides. They arrive one problem at a time, and each one is a covering rather than a fix. Japanese floors are the opposite of this. Tatami, or wood, kept clear, cleaned easily, with nothing layered on top. The floor is treated as a surface people sit on and live on, so it stays clean rather than being covered up. There's a plain domestic truth in it. Every layer added to a floor is a layer that has to be cleaned, moved, and eventually thrown away, and it was usually added to hide something that could have been dealt with directly. Thing 85. Furniture bought to fill a space. The unit bought because a wall looked empty. The side table, nothing goes on. The shelf that then had to be filled with things to stop it looking bare. This one is quietly circular, and it's how a lot of homes fill up. Empty space feels like a mistake, so furniture arrives, and furniture needs objects, and objects arrive to justify the furniture. Japanese rooms treat empty floor as the point rather than the problem. A room with space in it can become a dining room in the evening and a bedroom at night, which is exactly how traditional Japanese rooms have always worked. Space isn't what's left over after the furniture. In Japan, it's closer to being the thing the room is for. Thing 86. The chair that became a wardrobe. There's one in millions of bedrooms. A chair, entirely buried, functioning as a place clothes go when they're neither clean nor dirty. Nobody has sat in it for years. Japan's version of this problem barely exists, because worn once clothes get aired properly. Airing clothes and bedding is completely normal there, and balconies are full of it on a good day. The clothes go out, they air, they come back in and get put away. There's no middle state, so there's no need for a piece of furniture dedicated to holding it. The chair isn't the problem, the chair is where a missing decision goes to live. Thing 87. The second one, bought before the first wore out. A new kettle while the old one still works. A second coat, because it was nice. The old one stays, because it isn't broken. Nothing here is careless. Every single purchase was reasonable on its own. The Japanese habit that stops this is simple enough to state in 5 words. One in, one out. It's held as an actual rule rather than an aspiration, and it's easy to keep because it's enforced by the size of the home. The new thing physically cannot go in until the old one leaves. A rule that the house enforces is worth more than a rule you have to remember. Thing 88. Things bought because they were cheap. Not needed, not planned, but half price, so it came home. An offer converts an object into a decision about money rather than a decision about space, and space is the one that lasts. Japanese thinking on this is unsentimental. A thing you didn't need at full price is not a saving at half price. It's a full price payment in floor area, made forever, in a currency you can't earn more of. The discount was on the money. There's never a discount on the room it takes. Thing 89. The spare of everything. A spare kettle, spare bedding, spare tools, spare cables, all held against a failure that hasn't happened. Spares feel like wisdom. In a small home, they read differently. Japanese homes keep few spares because a spare occupies certain space to ensure against uncertain trouble, and shops are close, and delivery is fast. The exception proves it. Japan takes earthquake preparation seriously, and a household emergency kit is genuinely common and genuinely recommended. So Japanese homes do keep a spare of exactly the things that matter, deliberately, in one place, checked periodically. That's what a spare should look like. Chosen, limited, and reviewed. Not 11 of them, scattered, forgotten. Thing 90. A new one, when the old one could be mended. The shoe with a worn heel. The jacket with a broken zip. Replaced rather than repaired, and the old one kept anyway because it's nearly fine. Japan repairs, visibly and proudly. Kintsugi joins broken pottery with gold, so the break becomes part of the object's history rather than something to hide. Sashiko stitching reinforces worn cloth with lines of white thread that are meant to be seen. The idea running under both is that a mended thing can be worth more than a new one, because it now carries evidence of having been cared for. That completely changes what a worn object is. It isn't a failure waiting to be replaced. It's something that has been used enough to need attention, which is what use looks like. Thing 91. Things kept because they were expensive. The cost is the reason. It's the only reason left, and it applies to a payment made years ago that cannot be undone by keeping the object. This is the hardest one on the list to argue with, because it feels like discipline. Letting go feels like waste. But mottainai, properly understood, points the other way, and this is where the whole video comes back on itself. The waste already happened at the moment the thing stopped being used. Every additional year it sits unused doesn't recover any of the money, it just adds storage to the loss. An expensive thing doing nothing is more mottainai than a cheap one, not less. There is more unused worth sitting in it. Thing 92. Gift cards and points nobody redeems. Vouchers in a drawer, half of them expired. Loyalty points nobody has counted. They're kept because they're worth something, which is exactly why they don't get used. Spending them feels like it should wait for the right purchase. Japanese gift culture produces a lot of these, and they get used because there's an understood etiquette that a gift is meant to be enjoyed rather than saved. The gift was given so you'd have something good. Keeping it unspent turns a present into a small piece of admin. Thing 93. Storage bought to hold undecided things. Boxes, baskets, and units bought specifically to contain the overflow. It's the point where clutter starts costing money directly. Japan has an entire industry of beautiful storage, so this could be worse there than anywhere. What stops it is the order of operations. Japanese organizers affirm that you decide what stays first, and buy containers afterwards, once you know what you actually have. Buying the box first does something worse than nothing. It converts an unmade decision into a tidy object, so the decision now looks solved and will never be revisited. A labeled box of things you haven't decided about is still a pile. It's just a pile with better manners. Thing 94. Second-hand treated as a last resort. This isn't an object. It's the habit underneath a lot of the objects, which is why nothing leaves. If giving something away feels like throwing it away, nothing gets given away. In Japan, buying and selling used goods is completely ordinary. The shops are bright, clean, and busy, and people sell things there routinely without any sense of coming down in the world. That single cultural difference does more for a Japanese home than any storage technique, because it means objects have somewhere respectable to go. A home empties easily when leaving is dignified. It fills up when leaving feels like failure. Thing 95. Things kept for a person you might become. The suit for a job you might apply for. The dress for a size you might be. The equipment for a hobby you might take up. Each one is a small bet on a different life, stored at full size, in the life you're actually in. Japanese homes have no room to store hypothetical people, and there's something freeing in that constraint. A wardrobe that only holds the person who exists is a wardrobe that stops arguing with you. Thing 96. The drawer nobody can name. Every home has one. Batteries, keys to nothing, a tape measure, instructions, a single screw, a cable for an unknown device. It's the only drawer in the house with no category, which is precisely why things go in it. Japanese homes tend not to have it, because storage there is organized by where a thing is used, rather than by what it is. Things live near the point of use, so an object with no use has nowhere obvious to live, and its homelessness becomes visible immediately. The junk drawer isn't a storage failure. It's a place where objects go specifically to avoid being decided about, and it works so well that some of them have been avoiding it for 15 years. Thing 97. Things kept because someone might want them. Furniture held for a child who has their own home. Crockery kept for somebody who has never asked for it. It feels generous. Often, it's a decision being stored on someone else's behalf, without asking them. The Japanese habit is to ask, and to hand things over while they're still useful, rather than storing them until they're not. Giving a thing to someone who wants it now is a gift. Storing it for 20 years until they inherit it is a task you're leaving to them. Thing 98, the one you replaced, still here. The old phone, the old kettle, the old lamp. Replaced, but not released, because it still works. This is the quiet doubling that fills a house. Nothing was thrown away and nothing was wrong, and now there are two of everything. In Japan, the old one goes when the new one arrives, on the same day, because there is no space in which a duplicate can hide. The moment of replacement is the only easy moment to let go. After that, the old one becomes furniture, and furniture is much harder to move. Thing 99, the habit of deciding later. This is the last real thing on the list, and it's the one underneath every other item. Almost nothing in a full home was chosen to be there permanently. Things arrived, and no decision was made, and no decision is still being made right now. Japan doesn't avoid this through willpower, it avoids it through structure. Rubbish is sorted on fixed days, wardrobes change on fixed dates, decorations come down on fixed dates, things go back to fixed homes. The decisions are small, constant, and scheduled by something outside the person making them. That's the real difference between the two homes. Not discipline, not taste, just 100 small decisions that happen on time instead of never. Thing 100, the space itself. The last thing Japanese homes refuse to keep is the one nobody thinks of as a thing at all. Unused space in a Japanese home isn't waste. It's the most valuable thing in the room, and it's protected on purpose. A room with clear floor can be a dining room at 7 and a bedroom at 10. A room with clear surfaces can be worked at. A home with room to move through is a home you can breathe in. Everything on this list was kept for a reason that once made sense. Nothing on it was foolish. Each object arrived carrying an intention, and the intention was real. But that's exactly what mottainai was always pointing at. The word doesn't ask you to hold on to things. It asks whether the worth inside a thing is being allowed out. And 100 good objects doing nothing, in a house with no room left, is 100 small worths sitting in the dark. You don't have to do anything about any of this tonight. Nothing here needs acting on, and nothing is waiting for you in the morning. It's only 100 things, in 100 houses, in a country a long way from here, where the rooms are small and the mornings are quiet. The lights are off now. The house is as it is, and that's perfectly all right. Sleep well.